Thank you, Reverend Mary. May we receive the story from the Bible and the presence of God to uphold us as we consider a word the Spirit of God may have for us this day. So this morning, how will you measure your life? We're in week 2 of 3 of this series. Last week we began by the second part of that, saying by who and how you love. And we reflected on the fact that the world outside counts us, measures us by statistics, home runs, touchdowns, business sales, commissions, profits, standardized tests, and so many other ways. All the ways to say you're measured and you're successful. But we were reminded from Jesus' parable of the soils, or parable of the sower, to consider our lives, our relationships, our behaviors, our foibles. Are we striving to be healthy, fruitful soil that can bring a harvest of God's love? How will you measure your life? So last week was by who and how you love. Today, by who and how you serve. So who do you know who has, through their life, modeled an example of true and authentic service for you? I'd like you to consider people that you actually know. There might be people that you know of. There might be people that you have heard about, read about, seen documentaries or movies about, or remember in history about, that come to mind. And this week, as I hope you'll take your bulletin home, return to that scripture passage and think about for you, who are those people that by their example of service become an example of what Christ is inviting us to. So today I'm getting real personal. Because when I think about this story that Reverend Mary read and the sense of service, I think of my mom. My mom, Linda. Goodness gracious. Whew. Personal stories. My mom, Linda, after her second marriage fell apart in painful and unfortunate ways. She lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, and she needed to move. Her path where she had been was broken. And at that time, I was spending school back and forth between my dad and my mom between the school year and the summer. And that summer, it was after 9th grade, she and I packed up, got in the car, and went to Abilene, Texas from Lincoln, Nebraska. Abilene was where she had grown up in college. She actually, both of my parents and all of their siblings, all of the Hamilton and Schuberts, went to McMurray. It's now McMurray University in Abilene, Texas, a Methodist school in northwest Texas. So we went there, and she had arranged for us to have a college dorm room. And we were there for at least a week, I think. And she got there. She had brought with her a packet of resumes and letters of recommendation. And she hit the pavement. I remember sitting in the dorm room, hanging out, watching TV, reading. I was a big reader. That was before iPhones and games that you could have in your pocket. So, but I was an introvert, I could just entertain myself. So she would go off, and she literally hit the pavement around Abilene looking for a teaching job. And then, and she got one. So after I left to go back to Montana for high school, she and my brother Caleb, 4 years younger than me, moved into a little apartment. She ended up teaching elementary music and language arts, and Caleb moved through junior high and high school in Abilene. Now, at this point in her life, Mom had a lot of reasons to be self-centered, jaded, angry. But her innate sense of who she was exuded a spirit of generosity and service. She gave herself to her church. I remember growing up through the years, every week, whenever I was with her, that checkbook would come out. Anybody still have checkbooks? I still have a checkbook, but I'm one of the few. Oh, really? There's more hands than I thought I might see. I know there's a whole generation of people that have no idea what a checkbook is or why you would want one. I use them now to buy King Supercards. She would get out her checkbook every week and write in her tithe check, and that was part of the weekly ritual of worship. She gave of herself to her church, wherever she lived, to the school kids, the colleagues around her. And there was a time when my brother came into high school in Abilene. He joined the gymnastics team. And down there in Texas, that's a big deal. High school gymnastics is a big deal, and it's a very competitive thing. And so what happened was Caleb he was good. In fact, his senior year of high school, he went to a national competition and I think took third in at least one thing. So he was good, but he also created some friendships with some other guys on the team. And what happened was my mom, in her little low-income, tiny apartment, she became one of the team moms for this group of ragtag boys. There were boys from all kinds of family circumstance or no family circumstance, different levels of support for them as young men or not. And through the years, this group of boys grew so close. There were 2 different times when one of them would actually live with Mom and Caleb in that little tiny apartment. She got no extra money for it. She was scraping by as it was. And yet, there were 2 different, one of them, his parents were moving and they allowed him to stay to finish up high school. And there was another circumstance that was very tender and that she ended up being a solid support for another boy. So through the years, she was the mom to this group. And on her limited budget, she offered her home, her food, her love, and her guidance to these boys and became a second mom to them. She was a model of humor and generosity, love and service that these boys, who are all now 48 years old, still remember to this day. Through the years, the boys would get together and have a reunion. And until recently, she was there as the team mom. And when we had, 9 years ago, a surprise 70th birthday for her, many of the boys came from all over Texas to be there with Mom. Now, Mom is now 79, and she lives in a memory care unit with Alzheimer's. But her witness, the ripples of her simple being in relationship with these fragmented ragtag boys has made an example that is now into their kids and their families and their communities. That is unlike much I have seen in my own life. How will you measure your life? Who and how might you be called to serve? The gospel story Reverend Mary shared was actually one of the texts that we might hear on Maundy Thursday during Lent in the springtime. While the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke give us the story on Maundy Thursday, they give us the story of the Last Supper. The Gospel of John, which is a different gospel in a lot of ways, it doesn't have the Last Supper in it. What it has is what we heard today. It has Jesus instituting the foot washing and telling the disciples, y'all need to go forth and do this for each other and for the world. And that's the commissioning that Jesus gives in the Gospel of John that we hear during that Holy Week story. And as Janice said, the foot washing itself wouldn't have been heard. Those who heard this gospel or read it was not necessarily a strange thing for the culture. People would normally have their feet washed when they came in a house, as she described, or if they were riding on dusty paths or roads. But what became the powerful image of disruption when they heard this story was that normally when you came to a house, the owner or the host was not the one who washed your feet. There was someone else tasked with that. So in this story, Jesus shows in a very literal, practical way that this gospel message is serious and for everyone. That if we are to try to follow him, we too must find ways to serve one another beyond the norms, to disrupt the expectations of the world we're in. Can you think of an example when you've seen that happen, someone do that? Or when you've experienced that yourself? I want to invite you to think of that this week. When I was in my first pastoral appointment from 1997 to 2002, we were in north central Montana, rural little town called Chester, Montana. It's 40 miles from Canada. It's on Highway 2, which goes from Chicago to Seattle, and the train parallels that. It's called the Golden Triangle of wheat farming, in that the quality of the wheat, when it's not a drought and when they can get a good amount, is known around the world. And it is a rural little place. It was a lovely place to begin ministry. And I've kept in touch with people through the years there, and I was struck a few years after I left Chester. I heard a story about a family that we had been friends with and acquaintances with. They were a young couple, they were Lutheran, they were a young couple, ended up getting married, starting to have kids, and their son, I don't know, maybe 5th birthday party, young. I don't know about you parents when you've had birthday parties with kids nowadays, but my goodness, the expectations that can be placed on you or by you, or in looking through the Bed Bath & Beyond or the circulars on what you need to get, or Walmart for what you need to get for a birthday party, it can be pretty extraordinary. But what happened was this little boy did something different. He did something like Jesus. He disrupted the expectations. And they started a tradition where instead of his friends bringing gifts to the birthday party, they would bring items to help others. So I think the first year might have been local food pantry. So instead of bringing Johnny a gift, you brought non-perishable food to go to the food pantry. And what happened was, after that experience, instead of the kids and the family, being, oh, no gift, it became this, oh, what's it going to be this year? What are we doing this year? And it began a process of disrupting our concepts that changed, rippled out far beyond the family. There was clothing drives. One year we had a young man from our church, Bill Novak, who's now a pastor, an ordained pastor, but he was a Peace Corps volunteer in Paraguay, working with a school, and so this boy got a list of school supplies, and everybody who came to his birthday party brought school supplies to send to Bill Novak in Paraguay. And as I've reflected back on that story through the years, I thought, that's not really a hard thing. It's not a complex thing, and yet it made a difference. What are we doing this year? And I'll say it just as an add-on. I've been curious because on Facebook and social media, there is a rising temperature in some arenas of concern that this problem with the global supply chain, you may be hearing about how everything is clogged up and slowed down and who knows. And there have been some messaging saying, you'd better order your Christmas stuff now so if you want to get it, right? And somewhere along the line, there's been a couple people saying, what if that's not a bad thing? What if we took that problem and took a pause from the normal of Christmas, of having to worry about the stuff we're going to get. And so I've been just I'll be curious to see how things roll out. And it's a complex thing that's affecting a lot of people, but how might something be, is that a possible disruption for us to maybe ponder and learn from? I don't know. Are there ways in which, if we open our ears and our hearts, that we might look for or notice ways that the Spirit of God might be inviting us to be a disruptor, to be a person of service, maybe in a new way, maybe in a way we hadn't thought about before. You are endowed with gifts beyond measure. Some you may be aware of. Some others may have told you that they see in you through the years. There may be some that you're not even aware of. But I invite you to pause and to think about, what is it inside of you? Are there things that you notice? Are there kinds of people that you gravitate toward that maybe others look over? Are there ways in which, we mentioned this last week and we're still, collecting these spices for Warren Village, for single families who are struggling to provide for their kids and learn how to cook, because it's cheaper to do that than to buy all the prepackaged stuff, but the prepackaged stuff is quick and easy, and so it's a process of learning and growing, and we've been a part of bringing some help and healing for that. Are there ways of service that are around in your world that we might think about to model that love of Jesus to others? Sharing of your time, your knowledge, your kindness, your humor, and sometimes your money or your goods. And there are things that we as Grace, as we're getting the wheels of ministry kind of back going in new way. I'm not going to say the new normal, because nothing's normal. And it may never be. We're all having to regroup and see how we might do what God's calling us to do in new ways. If you have a gift of welcome or hospitality, we are trying to rebuild a greeting or a worship team, those old ushers and greeters. And Dave Rex, I'm looking at you as a person that we want to be a part of that. Today, Karen Sumner was so helpful at the table welcoming people. And we'd love to have a little team of people that could rotate through as your schedule allowed to help to be part of that greeting and welcoming team. To be helpful and positive as people come in to worship, to help answer questions. Here's the restroom right there. We're so glad to see you. Or I'm not thinking of your name. Can you share it with me? Often that first wave of presence for familiar folks and newcomers or visitors in our midst. And many other ways to ripple out. Look at the Grace Notes. If you're getting our Grace Notes emails, I know some of the things are repeated, but I hope you'll take a moment and actually look through. We update the mission block, and we every week it's the worship service, and there are some things that change every week, and we're now adding more things, now that more things are starting to be happening again. So take a look and tell us what we can do to be in communication so that we can be in service to one another. So how will you measure your life? By who and how you serve. As my mom's condition has progressed, she has forgotten more of what she did in her life and those that she impacted. But those gymnastics boys, and now their grown families, have not forgotten. Her depth of generous love and service will ripple out for years to come, and it has multiplied over and over this power of what Jesus modeled, that you and I can change the world by kneeling down, by taking the foot of another in an intimate, safe, humble act and gently washing each other's feet, so to speak. That boy who changed the way he had birthday parties not only made a difference to the people who received the food or the clothing or the school supplies, but he modeled to his classmates and the adults all over town the meaning of simple generosity and service. And that it can be fun. What are we doing this year? There's much, my friends, to be stressed about in our lives, in our community, in our nation, in our world. As we strive to become more like Jesus, may we, individually and collectively, find that true joy which can replace narcissism, anxiety, apathy, and can open us up to the many varieties of people God may place in our path. Acts of love, acts of service. How will you measure your life? By who and how you serve. I invite you to place your open hands in your lap and join me in an attitude of prayer. Lord, I offer my life to you. All I am and have, I give to you. Use me, I pray. Help me to see the world as you see it. Use me as an instrument of healing. Help me to love. Help me to give. Help me to serve. In your holy name, and all of God's children said, amen.